Russia is in the news a lot these days, and not always for the best of reasons. But how much do you really know about this incredibly large and incredibly mysterious nation? Join us as we discuss 10 crazy things you never knew about Russia. Russia boasts a deeper lake than any other country on Earth. This despite how it should be impossible for such a thing to occur. Lake Baikal can be found in southern Russia, far closer to China than the ocean. Even still, this lake sure acts like an ocean, clocking in at over a mile deep. Officially, it's 5,387 feet deep, but it's far more impressive to say over a mile, so we're running with that. Now, such a lake simply should not happen in a landlocked section of Russia like the southern part. Lakes, after all, typically form due to erosion, and erosion does not occur at such extremes when that far away from a water source. But in actuality, Lake Baikal defies the odds because of its location, rather than in spite of it. See, the lake sits right on an active continental rift zone. This rift widens by roughly an inch every year, which makes the channel that hosts all of Lake Baikal's water just a little bit deeper. It won't visibly change much in our lifetimes, but in the distant future, it will likely just get wider and deeper all the time, until Asia splits apart or some other tectonic plate crashes into it. The best part about Lake Baikal is that you can totally drink from it. It is the world's biggest supplier of fresh water. In fact, roughly 20% of our fresh water comes from this lake. This is more than can be said for certain other lakes in Russia. And here is that certain other lake, the most poisonous, deadliest lake in the world, residing in what is likely the most toxic place on the entire planet. Lake Karachay has the unfortunate distinction of sitting right next to one of the worst nuclear facilities in history. The Mayak Production Association, kept secret by the Russian government until 1990, would leak radiation and outright melt down far more than any nuclear factory ever should. Not that the government cared very much. The only reason they made Mayak public at all was that, well, a lot of people were getting sick. Between a 21% increase in cancer, a 25% uptick in birth defects, and 41% more cases of leukemia, it was clear something had to be done about the area. For poor Lake Karachay, however, it was too late. Mayak had spent decades dumping their nuclear waste into her waters, which now emitted radiation at frightening levels. By 1990, standing near, not in, but near the river would fill your body with 600 Roentgen worth of radiation. 100 Roentgen can cause death within 30 days, but 600 would kill you in under an hour. In the 30 years since, efforts have been made to curb the lake's deadliness. Its bottom is now full of concrete, designed to trap any and all radioactive sediment from reaching shorelines and drinking glasses. Even still, the general area is radioactive and dangerous, and likely will be for hundreds of years. But maybe, just maybe, you can hang around there for several hours before meeting your maker. Please don't test this theory. Russia is the largest country on Earth size-wise, but inside that giant country there are far fewer people than you might think. Russia sports a population of around 144 million, less than half of the United States. This gives it a population density of only 22 people per square mile. Obviously, 22 people don't live in every Russian square mile, meaning much of Russia is, to put it mildly, wild. In fact, well over half the country is forest, as if we were never there at all. While people don't live in these remote forested areas, they have been there. Unfortunately, they've been causing massive damage, mostly in the form of illegal logging. Untold millions of acres of forestry have been illegally removed, usually for sale to either Russian or Chinese markets. Due to both the size of the nation and general government apathy, such actions rarely go punished, even though destroying Russian forest is about as quick a path of pollution and destruction as there is anywhere else. As most of us know, trees supply oxygen, but they do so by absorbing millions of tons of CO2 per year, keeping the carbon and giving us pure, delicious oxygen to breathe. But thanks to scores of anonymous loggers who silently work their criminal magic far from prying eyes, CO2 absorption and oxygen generation is becoming harder and harder to come by. It's one thing to have a general spring cleaning mindset. The weather's warm, so it's time to tidy up the house. Now imagine an entire country doing that in one day. And also imagine that for a while the government forced you to do it, even if you were comfortable as a slob. That's Subotnik. On April 12, 1919, Communist Russia held the first ever Subotnik, where communities would get together to remove trash and debris, fix anything that's broken, and generally work to make their area that much better. This being communism, participation was mandatory, and no one got paid for their labor. Presumably, even Vladimir Lenin didn't receive payment for the work he did during 1920 Subotnik, though he did get his ability to carry logs immortalized in a famous painting by Vladimir Krikotsky. Good luck being a proletariat and scoring that perk. Many Russian communities still practice Subotnik annually, though it's no longer mandatory to get out there and help clean up your community. You'll just look like a lazy jerk if you don't. It's no secret that much of Russia is really cold, but one northern town takes cold to an entirely different level, to the point where we're honestly not sure why anyone lives there. The Russian town of Oymyakon, nestled deep in Siberia and merely a few hundred miles away from the Arctic Circle, is the coldest permanently inhabited place on the planet. Average summer temperatures rarely hit above 15 degrees Celsius or 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wintertime usually dips anywhere between -30 and -50 degrees. Its absolute coldest days saw temperatures hitting a bone-chilling -71 degrees Celsius or -96 degrees Fahrenheit. Most days, Oymyakon's only real activity is basic survival. To go outside in anything other than the heaviest of furs is to risk frostbite at best, a frozen death at worst. Few crops can grow due to the permafrost, so the 500 or so people who bafflingly choose to call this place home eat mostly reindeer and horse meat. What else can you look forward to in this icebox of a town? Well, electronics barely exist, cars don't start up because the gas and oil literally freeze, batteries quickly die, and even pen ink freezes up. Also, when a loved one dies, good luck burying them in the permafrost. You need to light a fire, dig a couple of inches down, start another fire, dig a couple more inches down, and so on and so forth. This process can take days, which makes us wonder how many people give up and leave the body out in the field to freeze and mummify like the poor blokes who didn't make it down Mount Everest. Many feel communist Russia fell when the Berlin Wall did, but we know the truth. Months before the wall came tumbling down, communist ideals did thanks to the opening of perhaps the most non-Soviet restaurant imaginable, McDonald's. Western food, along with most anything else of Western origin, was largely banned in Russia due to fears that it could influence the populace to embrace ideas not endorsed by the state. But by 1990, the Western ideal that was food, folks, and fun could no longer be contained. And so on January 31st of that year, Russia opened its very first McDonald's in Moscow's Pushkin Square. The people were ready. They knew all about McDonald's and were craving a taste of the fabled Big Mac. On opening day, thousands of people got in line and waited their turn to sample the goodness of 2 all-beef patties and special sauce. McDonald's was an immediate hit in Russia, and today the country boasts over 650 restaurants. Communism is temporary, but Happy Meals are forever. Being the largest country on Earth, it makes sense that they'd have some pretty long railways. In fact, they have the single longest in the world, the Trans-Siberian Railway. No relation to the Trans-Siberian Orchestra that we know of. To go from start to finish on this track is to truly test your love of trains. Your journey on the Trans-Siberian Railway starts in Moscow. It ends in Vladivostok, 9,289 kilometers away, or 5,772 miles away. It takes just over 6 days to complete the entire trek, plus an extra 3 days if you choose to continue on into North Korea. We advise that you don't. The railway has been part of Russia since the 1890s, after Tsar Nicholas II completed a trip around the world and marveled at how nice it would be to take a relaxing train ride across Siberia. Well, what the Tsar wants, the Tsar gets, and so he got a 5,700-mile railroad. Today's Russia likely wouldn't be able to thrive without the railway. An incredible 30% of its exports take the Trans-Siberian route. That comes to about 200,000 containers per year, which the nation wants to double sooner rather than later. Something tells us they will make that happen. If you're on the internet, and since you're watching this video, you most likely are, then you probably adore cats. So what if we told you there's a museum in Russia swarming with goofy, purring fuzzballs? Sounds like heaven, right? Located in St. Petersburg, the Hermitage Museum is home to around 74 cats, each of whom technically works as a mouser. In 1745, Empress Elizabeth ordered that cats be brought to her palace to remove all the mice within. The cats did such a good job they got to stick, and almost 270 years later, they still roam what is now a museum. Not the same cats, of course. That would be creepy, not to mention smelly. As befitting a line of creatures who used to help an empress, these cats are treated like royalty. Several volunteers spend up to 6 hours a day pampering the kitties, fixing their favorite food individually, and get them to their own private hospital whenever something isn't right with them. It is not possible for these cats to be happier than they are. Unfortunately for all the cat lovers watching this, you may not be able to see the cats if you visit the Hermitage. They all live underground and tend to stay there. Sometimes, however, you may hear them meowing or purring near a vent. And if you're really lucky, one will escape and scamper across the museum grounds until a handler catches up with them and carries them back home. Don't try to take them home. They're much happier in the museum, living the life of kings and queens. If you lived in Russia between 1929 and 1953, you did not want to go to the Gulag. They were brutal and torturous concentration camps that the Russian government would use to lock up anybody home they didn't like. Political dissidents, suspected spies, and general rabble-rousers formed the 18 million or so people who suffered in the hundreds of gulags littered across the then USSR. Since 2017, two of these gulags, Alzir and Karlog in Kazakhstan, have been operating as museums, detailing the atrocities committed within their walls. But unlike, say, the Holocaust Museum, these gulags' histories aren't exactly treated with quiet respect. Rather, these places hire actors to put on full-blown simulations of the terrible treatment prisoners got in these places. In Karlog, tourists can even play the part of the prisoners. They get fed food exactly like what they would have been fed at a real gulag and are even ordered to not sleep as part of the mock torture. Advocates say gulag simulations are a good way to help preserve the memories of these horrible places and to ensure such things never happen again. Opponents consider them voyeuristic and exploitative. What do you think? Whatever side of the fence you're on, we can certainly all agree on one thing. You would never want to go to a real gulag. For the most part, shamanism, a spiritual practice where you alter your consciousness to become one with the spirit world, doesn't exist anymore. Russia was not much of a fan of them, considering them quacks and charlatans and murdering them for supposedly being so. However, the ancient practice is still observed in certain parts of Russia, in particular on Olkan Island, a small locale around Lake Baikal in southern Siberia. Their numbers are few, but their beliefs are strong. Don't expect to find too many modern trappings around the island, but do expect to visit the temples and provide offerings such as money and cigarettes. Failure to do so could offend the evil spirits in the area, and there's no quicker way to ruin a vacation than that. Unfortunately, the island shamanism is still under attack, this time due to chemical pollution of the local waters, excessive tourism, and good old exploitation. Many islanders acting like shamans are just that, actors. They're not real shamans, but rather playing the part so tourists give them lots of money. A few legitimate shamans remain, but they are becoming rarer and rarer all the time. That cannot make the spirits happy.